The clatter of cutlery on ceramic was the only sound that broke the morning calm at the Greasy Spoon Diner. It was a comfortable noise, the rhythm of a small town waking up. Seated in the largest booth at the back, away from the windows, were 5 men who seemed out of place in the cozy, sunlit room. They were mountains of leather and denim, their vests adorned with the patch of the Iron Sentinels Motorcycle Club. Their presence created a quiet pocket of tension in the diner. Other patrons cast nervous glances their way, speaking in hushed tones. The men themselves paid no mind. They were focused on their plates of eggs and bacon, their conversation a low, gravelly murmur. At their head sat Victor, the club president, a man known simply as Ghost. His face was a roadmap of hard miles, but his eyes were clear and watchful, missing nothing. Suddenly, the bell above the diner door didn't just jingle. It crashed against the glass as the door was thrown open with desperate force. A small boy, no older than 8, stumbled inside. He was a mess of tear tracks, dirt, and raw panic. His jeans were ripped at the knee, and one of his sneakers was missing, his socked foot smudged with mud. He stood there for a second, chest heaving, his wide, terrified eyes scanning the room, filled with frozen strangers. The waitress stopped mid-pour, coffee sloshing onto the counter. A couple in a nearby booth put down their forks. The world seemed to hold its breath. The boy's gaze swept past the stunned faces of the townsfolk and landed on the back booth. He saw the leather, the patches, the sheer size of the men. For a moment, fear warred with desperation on his young face. Desperation won. He took a staggering step forward, his voice a raw, broken plea that cut through the silence. "Please," he sobbed, his small body trembling. "My dog is trapped." The diner remained a tableau of shock. People stared, unsure of what to do or say. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered to their companions. But in the back booth, the reaction was instant and absolute. 5 sets of cutlery were placed silently on 5 plates. 5 men pushed their breakfast away, their meal forgotten. Ghost slid out of the booth, his movements fluid and economical. He didn't tower over the boy. Instead, he dropped to one knee, bringing his weathered face level with the child's. The other bikers stood behind him, forming a silent, solid wall. They weren't menacing, they were simply present, a bulwark of focused attention. "Easy, son," Ghost said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a low rumble that was meant to calm, not intimidate. "Breathe. Now tell us what happened. Where's your dog?" The boy, Leo, pointed a trembling finger back toward the door. "He fell," Leo gasped, new tears spilling down his cheeks. "Buddy fell down the old shaft at the Miller property. He's hurt. I can hear him crying, but I can't get to him." He looked up at Ghost, his eyes pleading. "Please, you have to help him. Nobody else will." Ghost placed a hand on the boy's small, shaking shoulder. "We'll help him." It wasn't a question or a suggestion. It was a statement of fact. He looked over his shoulder at his men. Bear, the club's sergeant-at-arms, a man built like a vending machine, was already pulling a thick roll of cash from his pocket and dropping it on the table, more than enough to cover their meal and a generous tip. Reaper, the club's silent, watchful investigator, had his phone out, his thumbs already flying across the screen. Doc, a former Army medic, nodded once, his hand instinctively going to the small pack he always carried. Ghost stood up and looked at Leo. "Show us the way." Leo led them out of the diner at a frantic run. The bikers didn't run. They moved with a long, ground-eating stride that easily kept pace with the desperate child. They followed him off the main road and down a dirt track that led to a large, overgrown plot of land surrounded by a sagging chain-link fence. A large sign, new and garish, proclaimed it the future site of Thompson Luxury Estates. Parked near a freshly bulldozed patch of earth was a gleaming black sedan. Standing beside it was a man in a crisp polo shirt and khaki pants, talking angrily into his phone. He was handsome in a severe way, with a practiced smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. This was Mr. Thompson. "I don't care about the permits, just get the crew out here and fill it in," he barked into his phone. He snapped it shut as Leo ran onto the property, the bikers following close behind. Thompson's face soured as he saw the boy, then darkened further as he took in the 5 men accompanying him. He straightened his shirt, puffing out his chest in a display of ownership and authority. "What is the meaning of this? This is private property. You are trespassing." Leo ignored him, running straight to the edge of a dark, circular hole in the ground, an old, forgotten well shaft, its stone lip crumbling. "Buddy, I'm here, boy. I brought help." A faint, whimpering bark echoed up from the darkness below. Ghost walked to the edge and peered down, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. He could just make out a small brown shape huddled at the bottom, maybe 20 feet down. He turned to face Thompson, his expression unreadable. "The boy's dog is down there," he stated simply. Thompson scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "I'm aware. The animal wandered onto my property and fell in. It's a nuisance and it's holding up my work. I've already called animal control, but they're taking their sweet time." He looked the bikers up and down, his lips curling into a sneer. "This is a business matter, a legal liability. It has nothing to do with your kind. I suggest you take the boy and leave before I have you all arrested for trespassing." His tone was smooth, condescending, and utterly confident in his own superiority. He clearly believed his money and his polo shirt made him untouchable. Bad choice. Very bad choice. Ghost didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "We're not leaving without the dog." The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of an anvil. Behind him, his men fanned out slightly, not in a threatening way, but in a manner that subtly boxed Thompson in. They were a wall of leather and steel, their silence more intimidating than any shout could ever be. Thompson's arrogance, however, was a formidable shield. "Listen to me, you leather-clad reject," he hissed, taking a step forward. "I own this land. I own this town. You have no right to be here, and you have no say in what happens on my property. That mutt is a problem to be disposed of, not rescued." As Thompson spoke, Reaper stepped up beside Ghost and showed him the screen of his phone. Ghost glanced at it, his eyes narrowing slightly. He looked back at Thompson, a flicker of something cold in his gaze. "Thompson Development," Ghost said, the name sounding like an accusation. "You have a dozen pending lawsuits in 3 different states. Safety violations, unsecured work sites, an incident in Northwood where a child was injured on one of your properties." "A child, Mr. Thompson. Sound familiar?" The developer's face paled, then flushed with rage. The smooth mask of civility shattered, revealing the ugly, snarling entitlement beneath. "How dare you?" he spat. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." He took another step, his attention shifting from Ghost to the small boy cowering by the well. He pointed a sharp, angry finger at Leo. "This is your fault, you little brat. If you can't control your animal, it deserves what it gets." He started to move toward Leo, his hand raised as if to grab him. He never made it. Bear, who had been as still as a statue, moved with deceptive speed. He didn't touch Thompson. He simply placed himself between the angry developer and the terrified child. Bear was 6'5" and nearly 300 pounds of solid muscle, and standing there, he blocked out the sun. He looked down at the smaller man, his expression flat. "That's enough," he rumbled, his voice like rocks grinding together. Thompson froze, his angry momentum crashing against an immovable object. He looked up into Bear's implacable face, and, for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear entered his eyes. He had lost control, and he knew it. He took a half step back, his blustering threats dying in his throat. The world needs more people who stand up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Whether it's a child in a schoolyard or a dog trapped in a well, courage is measured by the willingness to intervene. If you believe that no animal should be left behind, and that compassion is a true measure of strength, take a moment to show your support. Like this story, subscribe to our channel for more tales of unlikely heroes, and comment below with the name of a beloved pet you'll never forget. Your voice matters, just like theirs. With Thompson effectively neutralized by bears' silent presence, the bikers turned their full attention to the rescue. They worked with the quiet efficiency of a team that had faced worse situations under far more pressure. Doc unzipped his medical pack, laying out a few basic supplies on a clean cloth. "It's about a 20-foot drop," he assessed, peering into the well. "Could be broken bones, internal injuries. We need to get him out carefully." Reaper produced a high-powered flashlight from one of his saddlebags, illuminating the dark shaft. Buddy, the small terrier mix, could be seen more clearly now. He was alive, but he was lying on his side, one of his rear legs bent at an unnatural angle. Ghost put his hand on Leo's shoulder, a gesture of quiet reassurance. "We're getting your dog back," he said again, his voice firm. "That's a promise." Leo looked up at him, his tears finally starting to dry. He saw the focused expressions on the faces of these big, scary-looking men, and for the first time since Buddy had fallen, he felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone anymore. He had giants on his side. Just then, the crunch of tires on the dirt track announced a new arrival. A county sheriff's vehicle pulled up, and a tall, weary-looking man in his 50s stepped out. Sheriff Brody adjusted his hat and surveyed the scene. A sputtering, furious developer, a small, worried-looking boy, and 5 members of the Iron Sentinels MC setting up what looked like a rescue operation. He sighed. It was going to be one of those days. Thompson immediately rushed toward him. "Sheriff, thank God you're here. Arrest these thugs. They're trespassing on my property, threatening me, interfering with my business." Sheriff Brody held up a hand, silencing Thompson's tirade. He had known the Iron Sentinels for years. They kept to themselves, ran a clean auto shop on the edge of town, and generally avoided trouble. He also knew men like Thompson, who blew into town with big promises and bigger egos. He walked over to Ghost, his expression neutral. "Ghost, what's going on here?" Ghost simply nodded toward the well. "Boy's dog fell in. Mr. Thompson here was more concerned about his schedule than the animal's life. We're getting it out." Brody looked from Ghost's calm face to Thompson's contorted, angry one, then to the tear-streaked face of the little boy. He walked to the well and shone his own flashlight down. He saw the dog, heard its pathetic whimper. He turned back to Thompson, his voice losing its neutral tone and taking on a hard edge. "This well should have been capped and sealed the moment you broke ground, Thompson. This is a dangerous hazard. You're lucky it was a dog and not this child who fell in." Thompson opened his mouth to protest, but Brody cut him off. "As of right now, your work site is shut down pending a full safety inspection, and if you interfere with this rescue in any way, I'll arrest you for obstruction and animal cruelty. Now stand back and let them work." Feeling the solid weight of the law now behind them, Leo felt a surge of courage. He was no longer just a helpless victim. He stepped forward, his voice small but clear. "Buddy is a good dog, Sheriff. He didn't do anything wrong." Sheriff Brody gave him a small, sad smile. "I know, son. We're going to get him." Empowered by the support, Leo turned his attention back to the rescue, wanting to help. He took the big flashlight from Reaper, holding it steady and aiming the beam exactly where the men directed him. He was part of the team now, as the bikers worked, rigging up a system of ropes and a harness they'd retrieved from one of their bikes. Thompson watched from the side, his face a mask of impotent fury. He had been dismissed, overruled, and humiliated, as Reaper, the lightest and most agile of the group, prepared to be lowered into the shaft. Thompson couldn't contain his spite. He stalked over to Ghost, his voice a low, venomous hiss. "You'll regret this, all of you. I'll own this club, this land, everything you care about. I will ruin you." Ghost didn't even turn to look at him. He just watched the rope play out as his men carefully lowered their brother into the darkness. "No," he said, the word hanging in the air, cold and final. "You won't." It was a promise delivered with the chilling certainty of a man who had seen true ruin and knew Thompson was just a spoiled child playing with matches. The threat was dismissed as easily as it was made. The rescue was a slow, tense affair. Reaper's voice echoed up from the well, calm and professional. "He's scared. Legs definitely broken. I'm going to try and splint it before we bring him up." Minutes stretched into an eternity. Leo held the flashlight without wavering, his small arms aching. Bear and the other bikers held the rope, their muscles straining, their focus absolute. Finally, the call came from below. "Okay, I've got him. He's secure. Bring us up. Slow and easy." They began to pull, hand over hand, the rope coiling at their feet. The silence was thick with anticipation. First, Reaper's head emerged from the darkness, then his shoulders. Cradled gently in his arms, wrapped in his own leather vest, was Buddy. The little dog was trembling, but he licked weakly at Reaper's chin. A collective sigh of relief went through the small crowd of onlookers that had gathered. The diner owner was there, as was the waitress and a handful of other townsfolk who had heard the commotion. They had come expecting trouble, but they stayed to witness a miracle. Doc was there the moment Reaper was on solid ground, taking the dog and laying him gently on a blanket. He worked quickly, his hands sure and steady as he checked the animal over and reinforced the makeshift splint. Buddy whimpered, but he seemed to know he was in safe hands. Leo rushed to his side, stroking his head and murmuring his name over and over. "It's okay, Buddy, you're safe now. You're safe." The sight of these huge, tattooed men, who looked like they could tear down buildings with their bare hands, working with such gentle precision to save one small dog, was a powerful image. It shattered every stereotype the townspeople held. The diner owner, a stout woman named Marge, wiped a tear from her eye. She took off her apron and began walking through the small crowd. "Let's help this boy out," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Vet bills aren't cheap." People dug into their pockets without hesitation, stuffing bills and coins into the apron. They saw Thompson being put into the back of the sheriff's car, not under arrest, but being escorted from the property. They saw the bikers comforting a small child. And in that moment, the town's perception of the Iron Sentinels changed forever. Ghost watched the collection, a faint smile touching his lips. He walked over to Doc. "How is he?" Doc looked up. "The leg's a clean break. He's dehydrated and in shock, but he's tough. He needs a real vet fast." Ghost nodded and pulled out his phone, making a call. "Sarah, it's Ghost. We've got an injured dog coming your way." "Yeah, a little guy. We'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Marge, who was approaching him with her apron full of money. "That's real kind of you, ma'am," he said, "but that's not necessary. The club will take care of it." He scooped up the still trembling dog, blanket and all, and carried him toward his bike as if he were made of fine china. Later that day, at the veterinary clinic on the edge of town, Buddy was resting comfortably in a clean kennel, his leg properly set and cast. Leo sat on the floor beside the kennel, his hand resting on the wire door, refusing to leave his friend's side. His mother, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes named Clara, had arrived after receiving a frantic call from Marge. She had listened, wide-eyed, as the story of the rescue was recounted by half a dozen people. Now she stood in the waiting room watching Ghost pay the entire substantial vet bill in cash. When he was finished, she approached him, her hands twisting nervously. I don't know what to say, she stammered. Thank you isn't enough. I can't possibly repay you. She looked at him, at his leather vest and the skull emblem on the back, her expression a mixture of gratitude and confusion. But I have to ask, why? Why would you and your friends do all of this? For a stranger? For a dog? Ghost was silent for a long moment, watching Leo whisper to his dog through the kennel door. He motioned for Clara to sit on the worn vinyl bench beside him. He didn't look at her when he finally spoke, his gaze fixed on the boy and his dog. When I was about his age, Ghost began, his voice a low, confessional murmur, my old man had a temper, and when things didn't go his way, he took it out on me. We lived way out in the country, no neighbors for miles, nobody to hear, nobody to help. He paused, the memories flickering behind his eyes. One day, a stray dog showed up, scrawny, thing, ribs showing. I started sneaking him food. He was the only friend I had. He'd follow me around, sleep at the foot of my bed. He made me feel safe. One night, the old man came home, drunker and angrier than usual. He came after me. That little dog, half my size, got between us. He stood his ground, growling, ready to die for me. He saved me that night. Ghost finally turned to look at Clara, his eyes filled with a profound sadness and a fierce conviction. My old man got rid of him the next day. I never saw him again. I never forgot. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. We all have a story like that, he said, gesturing with his head toward the door where Bear and Reaper were waiting. Every man in my club, a time when we were small or scared or alone, a time when someone should have stepped up for us, but nobody did. So we made a promise to each other. We would be the ones who stepped up. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Man or beast, it doesn't matter. No voice should go unheard, especially when it's crying for help. He articulated the simple, powerful code that bound them together, a code forged in the fires of their own past traumas. The world is full of bullies like Thompson, he continued, his voice hardening slightly. Men who see value only in dollars and power. They see a boy's love for his dog as a nuisance. We see it as loyalty. That's a currency they'll never understand. And it's a debt worth honoring every single time. A few days later, after Buddy was home and hobbling around the yard on his bright blue cast, Leo knew what he had to do. He spent a whole afternoon with his box of crayons, working diligently at the kitchen table. The next day, he walked with his mother all the way to the auto shop that served as the Iron Sentinel's unofficial clubhouse. He was nervous, clutching a rolled-up piece of paper in his hand. Ghost saw him coming and met him at the door, kneeling down just as he had in the diner. Leo shyly held out the paper. "This is for you," he whispered. Ghost took it and carefully unrolled it. It was a crayon drawing. In it, 5 giant, smiling men with leather vests and big muscles were lifting a small brown dog out of a dark hole. They all had colorful, scribbled angel wings sprouting from their backs. Above them, a bright yellow sun smiled down on the scene. It was simple, childish, and the most profound thank you he had ever received. 6 months passed. The seasons changed, and the story of the dog in the well became a local legend. Mr. Thompson's luxury estates never happened. Sheriff Brody's investigation, spurred by the incident, uncovered a hornet's nest of legal and environmental violations. Thompson's company was hit with massive fines and his permits were permanently revoked. He sold the land at a loss and was never seen in town again. The town council, with a push from a newly formed citizens group, led by Marge from the diner, rezoned the blighted property. It was now a beautiful public park. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the park was filled with the laughter of children. Leo was there, throwing a bright red ball for Buddy, who chased after it with no sign of a limp, his tail a blur of happy motion. The dog was healthy, strong, and adored. Leo was no longer the timid, tearful boy who had burst into the diner. He was confident and happy, safe in the knowledge that there were heroes in his town. Miles away, in the quiet, orderly clubhouse of the Iron Sentinels, a new object hung on the wall. In a handsome wooden frame, placed in a position of great honor right beside their official club charter, was a child's crayon drawing of 5 bikers with angel wings. It served as a constant reminder of their promise, their code. After the rescue, Ghost and his men had used the club's funds to start a local charity, Sentinels Shields, which worked with the local animal shelter to cover emergency vet bills for families who couldn't afford them. Their reputation had been completely transformed. They were no longer the scary outsiders. They were the town's quiet, watchful guardians. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes or shiny armor. They wear worn leather and ride machines that roar with thunder. They are men forged by hardship, who carry their own scars, both seen and unseen. They don't seek out trouble, but when they hear a cry for help, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem to the rest of the world, they answer the call. They listen for the pleas that everyone else ignores, reminding us all that the truest measure of a person's strength is not in their capacity to intimidate, but in their willingness to protect the most vulnerable among us. Real heroes answer calls they never expected to receive, and in doing so, they don't just save a life. They restore our faith in humanity itself.